Hi, my name is Jeff Sipe and I have over 10 years of recruiting experience, including 5 years at Google. In this video, I want to dive a little bit deeper into the STAR method and tell you what areas to focus on, and specifically stay tuned to the end. I'm going to tell you why adding LF to the end is so critical, and then we'll provide an example answer. So it's been a little over 3 months since I did my S.T.A.R method video, and in those 3 months, I've learned a ton, specifically where to focus your attention and why my additions are so critical for your success. So let's do a really quick overview. What is the S.T.A.R method? It's a great way to stay organized when answering behavioral interview questions. So what is the situation? What are the tasks you accomplished? What are the actions you took? And ultimately, what are the results? And so the S.T.A.R LF method, or STARLF, is you add learning and questions to the end. And so let's really dive in. I want to focus more on what I've learned about the STAR method and areas to focus your attention. So item one, situation and task. These two items should be under 30 seconds. So providing long explanations, it's just completely unnecessary, because what your interviewers really care about are your actions, your results, and ultimately what you learned. And so time yourself when you're giving this answer after you've typed it out in a Google Doc. And if you're giving a 2-minute situation and task, it's too long. Really chop it down, really high level. I'll go through that in our example. Item two, very clearly defined actions. So you need to specifically outline what you did and what you did as a team member. And sometimes it's beneficial to say, this was the first item I did, this was the second item, this was the third item, number one, number two, number three. It just will make you realize, okay, I've mentioned 3 actions, I've mentioned 5 actions. It's super helpful. You might want to also bring in just a little bit of relevancy, right? So if you're talking to a potential team member, you want to focus a little bit more on your team actions. And if you're talking to a hiring manager or a higher up, maybe you focus a little bit more on leadership, right? You're going to want to flex a little bit, but actions are going to be so critical. So name at least 3 specific actions that you took individually and or with a team. Now, item 3, results. When I coach my clients, they brush over the results, but this is so important. This ties the whole story together. So really, really focus on your results, and also kudos. You really want to talk about, my external client said this, or my internal client said this, or I got a bonus from leadership for the great results. That ties it in and it makes you more memorable for the interviewer. Okay, item 4, learning. This was part of my last video. And so really talk about what you learned, and not only what you learned, but how you have applied that successfully in the future. And the number one reason is making you memorable. If you can tie learnings into your examples, you are more memorable than your competition. Now, item 5, the 5th item, and the item I really wanted to deliver value in this video, is if you are short and organized, it means your answers are going to be 1 to 2 minutes, which means your interviewer is likely going to be left wanting a little more. So have specific follow-up questions that you've created to specific parts of your answer that you know and can answer very well, right? And so when you're thinking about your actions, for instance, give them a high level, but know a little bit more about the details of each of those actions. Same with results, right? Be willing to take that extra step of providing specific follow-up questions, because the likely result of that is that they will actually say, yes, I'd like to know more about this item, or I'd like to know more about that item. And that will just uptick your success level because you've already prepared the answers to those questions. Okay, let's dive right into an example. So the example is, Jeff, tell me about a time you had to manage a hiring manager's unrealistic expectations. Okay, reiterate the question, and then the situation was at Google. The hiring manager was relatively new to Google, and it was our first time working together. They had 5 software engineering openings, and they wanted to hire all of them in 6 to 8 weeks, and it was in a very specific, tough niche. And so I was tasked with making these 5 hires. The specific actions that I took were, first, I had to meet with the hiring manager face to face, just have that conversation, act as a trusted advisor. And this included outlining a typical timeline to hire at Google because they were still relatively new. Second, I came up with a list, a ton of follow-up questions just to determine the business needs, determine the skill set, make sure we needed all those skills if we had to hire quickly, etc. And then third, I recommended 3 approaches to speed up the process. So one, could we do a little bit of an internal hiring push and see if we could get a couple of internal transfers? Would we have the capability of doing a couple batch days where you interview 5, 6, 7 candidates in a day and you get everybody to line up their schedule so they can interview all day? And then lastly was just kind of taking the step of aligning with management to see if we could escalate people through the process, meaning escalate them on a similar path as people with competing offers so we could hit this timeline of 6 to 8 weeks. The ultimate result was really fantastic. We didn't quite get there. We got 4 hires in 10 weeks, and that made my hiring manager ecstatic. I mean, she was so happy with the results. We had to do a combination of internal transfers, batch days, and obviously the escalation piece helped us push those 4 through the process really quickly. And the other part of the cool result was I received 2 spot bonuses. One was from the recruiting end and one was from the engineering team, and those spot bonuses are just gravy on top of having a successful path for our hiring manager. What I really truly learned was that if you take a creative path and you work with a lot of different structures within some organization, you can have a lot of success. And while I haven't used this exact approach again, I had the opportunity to share with a collaborative partner on this approach who had something similar. The hiring manager was more established, but ultimately they had similar results, and it was awesome to share all that knowledge. So, are there any additional questions I can answer for you? I'm happy to discuss more of the process of how I sought out internal transfers, what the batch days exactly looked like, how I aligned with management and convinced them to actually escalate these cases. I can also talk about more about the example with my colleague, whatever you think works best. Happy to, answer any follow-up questions for you. Okay, and that's it, and you kind of sit back and let the interviewer ask that question. But these follow-up questions, again, you're very prepared to go into more details in every one of those areas, and super impactful. That answer is, it's 90 seconds, less than 2 minutes. It's pretty high level, and they're likely going to want to have a little bit of follow-up with you, but probably focused in the questions you asked because that's what you're putting in their head, and that's great because you're really defining what you did. The S.T.A.R method really puts it all together, and if you're leaving out the L and the F at the end, I mean, you're just not providing as solid of an answer, and that's where you're going to have success, and that is where you are going to separate yourself from other candidates. I really hope this helps. Good luck. Thanks.